GameWorn Radio is on the air.
Hey! Shelton scores! Hopping the Cordova, baby! We're going bowling. Now, let's go on Moose on a Harley. The fires, he scores! L.A. face with an Oakland booty. Scores! Make me a bicycle club. They score! Bowmeister paid that man his money.
GameWorn Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Derek with GameWorn Radio, part of GameWorn.us, and I'm joined with Doc Noise, Tom Vore, Dan Day, and our special guest Barry Meisel for the evening. How you guys doing today?
Good.
Always fantastic talking hockey.
I'm great, Derek. Thanks for having me.
It's glad to have you, Barry. I'm going to go ahead and let you lead the conversation, being our special guest. I know there's a few things that you want to get out there, let everybody know, and then we'll chime in maybe with some Q&A for you on the MeiGray programs and stuff.
Sure. Well, I thought, obviously, to me, the most exciting thing in early regular season for hockey fans and GameWorn fans, Connor McDavid. Obviously, his shoulder injury muted things after 10, 15 games, but I think he showed that this guy is going to be super for a long time, and we've worked really closely with the Oilers to ensure that collectors know exactly what he's wearing, because never before we've seen a player of that magnitude come in with a game-worn program where we're monitoring game by game and period by period. So I thought that was interesting to let all the collectors know exactly what the team's doing, what they're planning, and how we're monitoring it to make sure we know exactly what he's wearing. First time a guy, Gretzky, Crosby, don't we all wish we could have known exactly what guys like Gretzky, Lemieux, Crosby wore moment by moment in their careers, and now we can with a kid like McDavid.
Yeah, it's a really sucky thing that happened to him, because he's definitely going to have a flourishing career. Hopefully it'll be a long one and not cut short, as we've seen in the past.
Well, I think we've been talking about that. Hockey fans, generationally, we've seen these prodigies come along once every 20 years, and I'm talking about a guy who really has come with all the hype and all the predicted stardom, and I can't think of one guy who really hasn't made it. And I'm talking about the guys who people say, all right, this is the next real superstar. I'm not talking about the Alexander Dags or the Yashins, but when you think of, you had Guy Lafleur in the 70s, and I go back to rooting for hockey as a kid in the 60s, guys who came up through where it was a number one pick, where people were saying, this guy is going to be the next absolute superstar. You had Lafleur in the 70s. You had Gretzky in the late 70s. You had Lemieux in the 80s. Then you got to jump to Crosby and Ovechkin, guys that everybody said these are going to be superstars, and they all seem to make it. So I haven't heard this kind of hype in a long time for McDavid, and so far he's looked like the real deal until he got hurt.
No, it seems to me like every year after draft comes out, we always start getting big stories on some of the big name players, and we get a lot of price hikes on things, or at least large pricing on the first rounders. Like Yakupov, I can remember, was a pretty high rated player. Recently there was Tavares. I know Tavares' stuff goes pretty high and things like that. So where do you guys actually figure out how you're gonna price everything? Do you try and gauge what the demand's gonna be prior to actually getting the items to figure out what you want to do with it?
Yeah, I think it's a two-prong system. One, of course, is the market, gauging the market against other players of that caliber. And you bring up some good points, Yakupov, Tavares, Taylor Hall, McKinnon. Those guys, the first overall pick always comes with, a big ticket. But then there are different levels within that. I mean, a McDavid, in our mind, was nothing like a Tavares or a Yakupov or a Taylor Hall. Much, much higher because of the, I don't want to call it hype, just the opinion of scouts and seasoned hockey guys that say this kid is definitely going to be one of those stars. So that's one of the factors. The other factor, of course, is the demand. And, there are some teams that are hotter than others. There's some markets that are stronger than others where, and I can only speak, of course, to the teams we work with. We've worked with Edmonton since 2000. We know the collectors there. We know the market. So you combine the local market with the international market, the guys who, like we have a guy who wants to collect the first overall draft pick every year. He's got a jersey of every first overall pick. So when you add all that demand up, you kind of come up with a price. I mean, it's not throwing darts at a board, but it's not an exact science either.
Right. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about, and I was hoping maybe you could shed a little light, is how do you guys decide? I know you had a lot of foresight coming into it with McDavid and a lot of the hype going on McDavid, knowing he's going to be really, really popular. How do you guys decide and organize with the team exactly what the jersey schedule would be for that specific player?
Well, that's a great question. Before the season, well before the season, mostly late in the summer after the draft is, after it's obvious who the key guys are going to be and what the team's going to do, we sit down with the team and kind of, I don't want to say interview them, but obviously in our team deals, they rely on our expertise in the market, and we rely on, their vision. So using the McDavid as a good example, the Oilers had the vision that between the historic nature of this player and the fact that they're moving into a new building and really want to archive and start creating a Hall of Fame with history, they gave us kind of some of their views, some of their desires, and they also asked us our opinion on supply and demand. Because there's always been this, I don't call it a controversy, but there's always been back and forth among collectors as to how many jerseys is appropriate and when does a team start milking for too much money and when it doesn't become a good supply-demand ratio in the market. So what we knew the McDavid interest was going to be so strong that it wouldn't have made sense to only have him wear a couple of jerseys in his first 10, 15 games, because I've had guys that probably would have paid 50 or 100,000, guys who can afford that kind of stuff and would just go wherever they needed to go. So we kind of look at the appropriateness of, in this case, the Oilers did want to keep one for their archives, and they did want to give a player one. So that's why we all suggested he wear 4 for his NHL debut, because there was no other way to serve the collectors, serve the archives, serve the player, and preserve the history. So they said, so that's, I flew to St. Louis, and I was there at the locker room just making sure we authenticated the first 4 jerseys he wore, put them in the proper places, and they did the same thing at home for the first home game, which they happened to break out that inaugural orange shirt, which was another thing. They wanted to preserve a set of those orange shirts. And then off they went. We usually do with our program teams a player's first goal. Just about every top rookie, we isolate his first goal jersey, and there was obvious interest in that jersey for a guy like McDavid. And then, so after that initial wave of historic kind of firsts, he settled into his set ones, and that's when he got hurt.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate for McDavid and the Oilers. I know they're missing a huge piece of their puzzle this year just because of that injury.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you were actually in St. Louis to authenticate his first game in the NHL, and a lot of people actually don't realize that you actually go to key events to authenticate jerseys. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience is going to the games and how you authenticate them while you're at the game? I think a little inside information on actually what Barry does at the game would be a really cool story for some of our listeners to hear.
Sure. Well, I wish it was sexier than it sounds. I actually don't get to see much of the game because, we've always believed in MeiGray's vision from the start. We've been around since 1997. Was we have to serve as the liaison between the teams and collectors. It's not good enough for a team to say this is what the guy wore. We think authentication has to be absolute. And we've made this pitch to the teams when we've struck our deals to say, hey, we believe the collectors will be more confident in their purchasing and it'll be stronger for the hobby if there's absolute authentication, which is why we came up with our counterfeit-proof tags, tagging the jerseys before they're worn, working with the teams to authenticate, following the program numbers, checking, going into locker rooms and et cetera, et cetera. So to specifically answer your question, at key events, and the Stanley Cup Finals is a good example because I'm literally embedded in the locker rooms at the Stanley Cup Finals with our program teams, and it means just what it sounds like. I mean, they put me in a room outside. I mean, I'm obviously not sitting there listening to the coaches chat, but I'm with the equipment guys, and I'm looking at I'm recording the tag numbers of as the jerseys are being hung before games, and then checking them when they come off the players' backs after the games. In the Stanley Cup Finals, you'll have situations probably mostly because of the heat of the June, and because a lot of players, not a lot, some players have the desire to wear two shirts in a game, where I'm watching period by period, guys are changing their jerseys, and I'm literally in real time watching and checking in and out everything that's worn. So I'll be in a room right off the main dressing room with, my inventory logs and checking tag numbers and working with the teams so that I can conclusively say to the collectors who are spending the kind of money they're spending for a Stanley Cup Finals jersey that this is the shirt the guy wore in the first period, and he changed out of it in the second and back of it in the third. And it's to conclusively provide that authentication for the fans, for the collectors.
It's got to be a pretty cool experience just kind of being around it. Unfortunately, you don't get to watch the games, but I mean, the atmosphere still has got to be kind of cool. I mean, do you get to do any like pre-game stuff with the team or anything like that?
No, I do my job. I mean, it's like I used to be a sports writer. Before I started MeiGray, I was a sports writer at the New York Daily News. I covered hockey and I covered football, so I've kind of been around sports my whole life. I mean, it does get cool. There are some good inside, and I'll tell you one story. The Boston Bruins in 2011 were as good as any program team has been with MeiGray. I was on the family charter going back from Vancouver to Boston and back to Vancouver because it was more convenient for me than flying myself. They invited me to fly with the families. I actually, being embedded in the locker room, I was in the room, off the room, when they celebrated with the cup, when they just had their families and team in, when they actually, it was the first time since 1994 when I was covering the Rangers, I was actually in the locker room watching the Stanley Cup celebration, the players sipping from the cup, and all of them were wearing their jerseys. So that authentication took a long time, well into the night. And actually, it was back in Boston. That was the only night I could honestly have to say I couldn't authenticate after the game, because the players were in the jerseys for about an hour and a half after the game. They dumped them just in a sack, all covered with champagne. We all got on the plane because they won in Vancouver, and we flew through the night back to Boston. Nobody had slept. Of course, there was celebrations on the planes coming home. And then I literally got back to Boston Garden like 6 a.m. Equipment manager and I chugged up with the equipment bags, and I authenticated them right there. These sweaty champagne covered jerseys to finish it off before took possession of the jerseys and drove them back to MeiGray's office in New Jersey. So that was a fun, one of a kind of night.
Yeah, it sure makes for a hell of a trip, that's for sure. And the jet lag had to be awesome.
Yeah, it didn't really matter when you've got 20 game-worn Stanley Cup final winning jerseys in the airplane. It makes for a quicker flight.
No doubt. Now, I'm glad you mentioned your counterproof tags. A lot of collectors have been noticing the the replica jerseys that are starting to come with the MeiGray group, GROOP.
Yeah, well, that happened. That happened about it's got to be about after the 2008 Winter Classic. It's got to be about 6-7 years ago that we noticed they popped up. So many counterfeits coming from Asia, and we noticed that, and the same just incorrect serial number, and we've posted information about that, and I probably still get 5 to 10 emails a week from people checking inventory numbers saying, I paid $50 for this Sidney Crosby jersey. I think I hit the lottery. Can you confirm that this is the jersey Sidney Crosby wore in the Winter Classic? And I said, sorry. I mean, it's a sad problem. We wish we knew how to go against, how to do something about it, but there's really nothing you can do. It's just some counterfeit job done in Asia, and thousands came overseas.
Yeah, unfortunately, on something like that, it's just education to the end consumer. That's pretty much all you can do.
Right. But then, we've told a lot of people, and most people call knowing. I mean, you pay $50 for a Sidney Crosby game worn jersey. I don't think you could really think it's a gamer, especially
No,
when the
not a
word group
chance.
is spelled GROOP. And we do as much as we can to publicize the fact. But the thing we always say is we tell everybody, that's why we issue the population reports. That's why we have a toll-free number. That's why our website you can check. And we remind people that's what you should do about any jersey. We tell people you're making a trade, two guys making a trade. All you got to do is just check the tag numbers, make sure you're getting what you think you're getting, because we've seen the unscrupulous. We've seen guys claim they lose game worn letters when in fact, they're trading a game issue jersey that they're calling game worn. And unfortunately, that happens. We'd like to say it would never happen, but there are people who are not as honest as others, and these are the many reasons why our system is designed the way it is to protect the collector. All he's got to do is make a call. All he's got to do is log on the website and click the population report. And we started this company with that in mind, that decades later, you'll be able to check on every jersey that goes through our system. And now we're talking about, God, we're well into six figures. We've authenticated probably over 100,000 jerseys. And every one is, we could track it for you and tell you where it started, where it ended, and we think that's a boon to the hobby, and we think it will be for decades to come.
Yeah, definitely a great value and an asset in the hobby, that's for sure.
Yeah, and this was the vision we had, because I was a collector from the late '70s, and I knew you couldn't really rely on. My brother-in-law knew a guy who worked across the street from the rink, and that's how he got this jersey. Well, that's no way to have a game-worn hobby, especially when people were charging the dollars even back then that you would be paying for a jersey. So I felt there needed to be some better, more efficient, and more reliable way to track what was growing as a great hobby. And here we are, 18 years later in MeiGray's history, and I think the hobby is stronger and cleaner than ever. And that was our number one goal.
Yeah, definitely done a great job. I know just through the radio show, getting to hear a lot of different opinions about the good things MeiGray has done for the hobby, which actually brings up one of my next questions. One of the hot topics as of late has been chopping up jerseys and putting them into cards. And I know they've said that you've been kind of collecting the MeiGray tags that go into the cards that we're starting to see now. I know we've seen some Red Wing set tags going into cards and things like that. And with the Red Wings, it looks like they're even issuing out a specific set of jerseys with the intent to cut them up instead of other things. So what are your thoughts and opinions of seeing these jerseys getting cut up, and what does MeiGray do for the card companies, if anything at all?
Well, we do. To answer the second question first, I can tell you that the card companies made a lot of mistakes 10, 15 years ago, and we pointed them out to them in the interest, again, as I previously said, to make sure that everything worn is legit and everything in the hobby is legit. They buy from us. They tell us what they need. We work with the teams to ensure that what they need can be delivered to them, because game use is a big factor. We try to give them lightly used jerseys, but we make sure that every jersey is used. And I am of the opinion, just as many people who don't know about our hobby think we're crazy for collecting dirty laundry, I'm not one of these guys who says it's heresy to cut up jerseys. I do not like, and I'm personally against an Upper Deck or a Panini cutting up, or In the Game, which did it a decade ago, cutting up historic relics like Turk Broda stuff or Terry Sawchuk stuff. But I do believe that our hobby gets larger and stronger and better when there are more people collecting game-worn items. People who can't afford a game-worn jersey like the concept of the game-worn jersey card. Personally, I don't see the value in collecting a swatch of a card, but I get the fact that there are people who want to be part of our hobby, and this is the only way they can do it. So I look at kind of the bigger picture that if game-worn jersey cards are going to exist, let's not cut up historic relics. Let's cut up a jersey that was worn in one period that can kind of serve the jersey card hobby. Like even for a guy like McDavid, there are people who are not even going to come close to dreaming about owning a Connor McDavid game-worn jersey because of the the money it would cost them, but want to be in our hobby. So this is the next best thing. So rather than giving them a jersey that would be of a historic nature or a 10-game McDavid, you give them a jersey that was worn for a period, and it serves everybody as best as you can. So I guess that's a long-winded answer to your question, Derek, and I believe there's a place for the game-worn jersey card hobby, but I prefer to see them cutting up jerseys that do not really adversely impact us serious collectors of the top game-worn items.
Now you touched on something there as far as like trying to expand the hobby through the card collecting avenue, and I just wanted to say that that's actually how I got into it myself, was looking at these game-worn jersey cards on eBay, right? And I ended up stumbling across an actual full-blown game-worn jersey, and luck be have it, it was a MeiGray jersey, which prompted me to go to MeiGray.com and find MeiGray and discover that there's actually an entire hobby around it. So I can definitely sympathize with what you're saying on that regard, even though I do still deep inside me hate cutting up jerseys.
Yeah, and it's a case of growing the hobby. I too don't prefer it, and the only game-worn jersey cards I have, as you alluded to, is I think it's cool to have a card with my company tag on it. But I do recognize it grows the hobby, and your story is not unique. I've had a lot of collectors over the last years say to me, I started collecting game-worn jersey cards and then realized these cards are costing me $100, $200 a card. I could get a whole jersey for $4.95 of a decent player. That made more sense to me. So in many ways, the game-worn jersey cards have helped our hobby grow.
Most definitely. Now, for a lot of new collectors, we can obviously put in the 2 cents. Barry Meisel, MeiGray. Where does the gray come into play for some of the listeners that don't know?
The one thing I will admit to when we started this company is we had no idea what to call ourselves. My partner, who's a financial partner, his last name is Gray. So it was Meisel and Gray, and we couldn't come up with anything better than MeiGray. So that's where it came from. My partner's name.
Definitely. I kind of figured as much. Just never hear anybody with the last name of Gray around. So
yeah, he's not. He's strictly a financial partner. He's listed on the board of directors, which is him and I. But he's a behind the scenes planner. I run the day to day.
Sounds to me like he definitely made a good decision investing in you guys.
Well, at the time it was he and I sitting together. He had the money and I had the idea and the vision, and that usually is a good partnership, because if I didn't have the money, he didn't have the vision and the contacts, so it was a good 50-50 arrangement at the time.
Beautiful.
And we've never looked back.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, it has definitely worked out, which actually prompts me to my next question. Is it possible for you to kind of give us a little bit of history from the beginning of MeiGray to now, just kind of like maybe some key moments, milestones for your company?
Sure. Well, one of the stories I like to tell, and it came up just recently because, as most of you guys probably know, Lou Lamoriello was with the Devils since 1997 and just moved on. And after, the Devils was one of our oldest relationships. So it's been 18 years with the Devils, and I just had to meet a whole new front office. So when MeiGray started, as I said, I was a New York Daily News sports writer who had this idea to work directly with the teams and leagues and kind of improve the level of authentication. I knew I was covering the New York Giants at the time, and I had covered the Rangers and Devils most recently. So I made plans to make 3 pitches. This is when I still was at the Daily News. And Bob Gray and I had met, and we had our plan for, let's see if we could start this company. And I set up meetings with the Mara family, John Mara, who was president of the New York Giants, Neil Smith, who was general manager, president of the Rangers, and Lou Lamoriello, who was president, general manager of the Devils. And I sat down with each of them separately and said, laying out this plan, and this hobby is a real hobby, and I'm thinking of leaving the Daily News and starting this company. And they all knew me very well. They knew I wasn't crazy. But why would I leave a position as a sports writer to start a company? And so they kind of looked at me funny till I said, look, here's what I'm prepared to do financially if you sign a contract with me. Well, then they stopped laughing and stopped thinking I was crazy. Or they may have thought I was crazier when I told them what I was willing to pay them. So Neil Smith and Lou Lamoriello were like at the opposite ends of the spectrum in the hockey world. Lou was, everybody knew him as this real conservative, close to the vest kind of general manager who was having great success. Neil Smith was a little more flamboyant, a little more risk-taking, and obviously the Rangers had just won a couple of years earlier, the first Stanley Cup in 54 years, so he had a lot of notoriety. And when both these guys said, you leave the Daily News and you start this company and we're willing to sign a contract with you, I knew I had something. So that's how I've since used that early story, and the Giants as well. I signed the Giants also in 97. So those are my first 3 teams, and that was what got MeiGray off the ground. And I used that as a momentum generator because anyone in hockey knew Neil and Lou were the most polar opposite executives in hockey, and both of them thought this was a good idea. So it's how I got the Phoenix Coyotes, how I got the Dallas Stars, and those were my first couple of teams, and that started to steamroll. And that's when the NHL front office took notice and contacted us and said, hey, we think you got something here. Can we talk about doing something league-wide? And that's how the MeiGray name started to snowball.
Very cool. Now, obviously, MeiGray has been a huge part of growing the hobby, and I would even go as far as to say establishing some sort of order in the hobby. What would you say are some of MeiGray's biggest challenges right now?
Biggest challenges remain, number one challenge always remain, staying in front of the hobby so that we effectively and properly respect the supply-demand ratio. Teams are always saying, let's make more jerseys. Let's make more jerseys. We could sell more. And while they're my business partner and I have to respect the fact that everybody always wants to make more money, I also have to tote that fine line. We consider ourselves the liaison between the teams and the collectors. So I have my team partnerships, but I also have, I believe, a responsibility to the collecting hobby to do it the right way. So that's the biggest challenge I face on a day-to-day basis is where do you get in the middle of pumping out more jerseys so a team can make more money short term versus keeping the hobby strong so this doesn't become something where 5-10 years from now the jerseys are totally devalued, because I have very, very strongly want to keep the collectors in mind as well, because I think a robust hobby is good for everybody. So that's a constant battle. These are very strong, smart people in the front offices of hockey, so they get it, but they also, they have the challenges of let's make more money. And certainly, we alluded to this earlier, when you have a player like McDavid, it becomes a very difficult question, because I probably, if I wanted to, not that we ever considered this, I probably could have sold 80 McDavid jerseys, 1 per game. And I bet you the hobby would have been very happy with that at a lesser price. But I didn't think that was a good idea, because I think that would have flooded the market and eventually rendered his jerseys worth a lot less than they will be now that we're kind of monitoring what he's wearing. So that's the number one challenge. The other challenge, of course, is authenticity. You have to be very vigilant to make sure we're watching what is being worn in the National Hockey League, and that we're authenticating more and more jerseys from non-program teams, from special events, and collectors. For the last 10 years, we've had 100% absolute guarantee of authenticity, and you can never take your foot off the gas in making sure of that. So that's the biggest challenge, but that's what I'm most proud of, because we like the fact that collectors, when they see that a jersey came through MeiGray, they don't have to worry, because that's the thing that will ruin this hobby the quickest for an experience, for a collector or for a team. If there's a stain and you find that jerseys that were purportedly worn were not worn, that ruins it for everybody. And that's what we are constantly vigilant to ensure does not happen.
Now, every time I go to a show where MeiGray is present, you always bust out some fantastic, phenomenal jerseys. I think my favorite has been the 3-of-a-kind Howe WHA jerseys.
Yeah, those were cool.
Absolutely incredible. What is your favorite jersey or set of jerseys that you guys have right now?
Right now, well, we're constantly changing. I mean, I will say, I'd like to tell you the story of what has been from, of all time, my favorite jersey. We don't have it anymore. We did finally sell it, but we got about 10 years of marketing. And we like to purchase jerseys both for marketing purposes to bring them around to the many shows we do, with also the notion that they're going to sell on the secondary market. But my favorite jersey and my favorite story dates back to 2000, our third year of existence, when Eddie Shore's family put up 5 jerseys that their dad wore while he was playing, including an unbelievable 1927-28 Bruins jersey that he won the Stanley Cup in. Now, we've shown this jersey. It's on our MeiGray Select website. We sold it recently, not too recently, about a year ago, but we took this around. Derek, I think I brought it to Toledo. Did you see it in Toledo?
I definitely did.
Yeah, and it's an amazing sweater. So the family holds this auction in like a barn, one of these old Southern type
Take the one from there.
outdoor barn auctions in 2000, and about 4 hours away in Springfield, Massachusetts, where the family was living, where Eddie Shore owned the Springfield Indians minor league hockey team, and I won the shirt in an auction for $42,000. So in 2000, that was a phenomenal number, even for a vintage 1927-28 sweater. So I was pretty excited, but I came home, and it was about a 4-hour drive, and the jersey's sitting in its plastic bag in the front seat next to me. I can't take my eyes off it. I'm not even watching the road for half the trip because I keep looking down on this. Can't believe that I own this thing. And I decided before I went home, it was a Saturday night, to go to the office and just put it in the safe. Well, something prompted me, because I'd seen pictures of Eddie Shore. I opened up one of these 100-year of hockey, these picture books, and wouldn't you know it, that a picture of Eddie Shore standing along the boards during a practice in 1927-28. These are the days when the players wore their shirts, in practice and in games. And I photo matched it to a photo from 1927-28 season. And between the repairs and the sweat stains, the jersey looked 72 years later, exactly like it looked in 1927-28. It was the best photo match ever. I was so excited that I made the purchase. And I always, every time I brought that jersey around, I brought the book with it to show the photo match. We believe it's the earliest conclusively photo match jersey ever. And it was incredibly, incredibly great to own that for about 10 years. Right now we're trying to amass a collection of really, really early vintage jerseys. We have a Detroit Cougars. We have a Chicago Blackhawks. Barber Pole. We're trying to do a lot of original 6. We have a 1940s Rangers. So we're putting a collection of original 6 sweaters to bring for our next show. And we're constantly thinking about themes to kind of have that kind of stuff to show collectors, and we're constantly changing it up. So it's the 40s, it's the real vintage stuff that really gets me going.
Excellent. Now, we actually have a question coming in from some of our live listeners right now. I've got
Sure.
a question from a user ID, Ocho Nueve, and the question is, throughout MeiGray's history, some years have had more teams in the program and some years have had less. What is MeiGray doing to further develop or create new business relationships with NHL teams?
Well, we're constantly talking to teams. I mean, the dialogue is nonstop. I mean, we've had deals and we've had seasons where we'll buy a set of jerseys from the team. We'll have seasons where teams want to join the program. It's an ongoing, I don't want to call it a battle, but it's an ongoing give or take, because we recognize that the more we promote authenticity and publicize what we do, the more we make it enticing for a team to do it itself. We take it as a compliment that a lot of teams have basically employed our level of authentication, putting tags in the jerseys before they're worn, keeping track of game use. And while it makes it tougher, a team wants to try to do it itself and cut out the middleman, for lack of a better term, we take that as a compliment. Of course, we like to think that some teams are not as good at it as we are, because as we've told teams many times in meetings, your job is to win hockey games. Our job is to authenticate jerseys. It's kind of like some people paint their own house when their house needs painting, and maybe they'll fall off the ladder and break their ankle and wish they'd hire a painter. we like to think that we're the best source for authenticating jerseys, and that's the pitch we make to teams. So it's an ongoing cost benefit for teams to use us or do things themselves. So we're always talking to teams and always trying to strike new deals.
Excellent. Now, you guys have been to shows all over, not counting the shows that you put on, because obviously that's going to be your favorite. What has been some of your favorite experiences on shows not put on by MeiGray, where MeiGray's in attendance? Sure.
Well, I will say without a doubt, to me, the key to any show or the passion of the collectors in that area. There are a lot of guys who work really hard to put on good shows, and I'd say the Nova Expo, the Northern Virginia, which is Capitals country, D.C. area. Frank Rady has put on that show for, I don't know how many years. That's a fantastic show. The guys in the Toledo Expo, which used to be the Detroit Expo, Dan Savig and Larry Pelliccioni have always done a good show in Detroit, Michigan, Toledo area. So I think those two shows pop out. There used to be a really good Boston show, but that show, there hasn't been a Boston show in years. That used to be a really good show. I have not visited the Pittsburgh show. That's one show that I hear is really good that I have not gone to. But I think the regional shows with passionate collectors are where you find the best stuff and the best talk. And again, to me, the most fun of an expo, besides seeing shirts that you've never seen before, is the passionate collectors talking the hobby.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've met some of my favorite people at expos, so it's always a really good time. And I've not yet been able to get to the Nova Expo myself, but I'm hoping, life permits one of these times that I can actually do that. Now I know I've been asking a lot of questions, and we're taking questions from the listeners right now, but we do have a couple people connected that are actually listening to the show, and I'm sure some of them have a couple different questions. So if either Doc, Eric, or Dan have some questions, I'm going to open the floor to you guys. We got about 20 minutes left.
Sure. Hey, Barry, it's Doc. With some of the jerseys you've come in, what are the weirdest either repairs or customizations you've seen?
Customizations always make us laugh. I mean, you got, obviously, many of the customizations are fighters putting any number of crazy stuff, from additional fight straps to shoelaces with coins wrapped around them to tighten the jerseys. Additional cuffs. Ovechkin is now, his shirts are kind of crazy. Not only does he have 3 fight straps, he was getting grief from the league for his stuff flying all over the place. Ovechkin has 3 fight straps, 1 in the back, 2 in the sides to tie his jersey down. He also doesn't like getting pulled. And he has, because he has almost like his elbow pads, he likes really shortened cuffs, and the league didn't want him showing elbow pads, so he actually has a customization on his elbow pad to make it look like part of his sleeve. So Ovechkin's jerseys are pretty crazy. You go back in time, I remember before the league cut down on goalie equipment, the goalies, and they did at one point, I know they're talking about it again, but back in the late 90s, goalies were wearing size 64 jerseys. I know Brodeur, they used to slice the side seams of Brodeur's jerseys and put in these huge triangular pieces. It almost was like a size 68. Patrick Waugh was another guy like that. So the bigger inner padding, bigger chest padding, and even, believe it or not, the goalies kind of felt they looked bigger in these bigger jerseys, and psychological as well as actual, cutting down the size of the net for shooters to see. Some of the other, you got some guys, some smaller guys, really shorten their jerseys. I do remember a story when Marty St. Louis broke into the league and came out of nowhere. He made the All-Star team. I believe it was 2004, maybe 2003. MeiGray was running the league program, and his jersey, he was so small, and his jersey had to be customized. They had to take like 6 inches out of the body, so it didn't look like a dress going down below his knees. That's some of the things that jump out at me that I remember.
Thanks for that question, Jason. Do you have any more?
Thanks.
We're so rapid fire right here.
Okay, I got one. Hey, Barry. Dan here. you work with teams. We all know that. How do you authenticate a jersey of a team that you don't work with? Whether you acquire the jersey through a trade or whether you acquire the jersey through a purchase, ever how you do it. How do you authenticate that jersey so the buyer knows that they're getting a game-worn jersey of that player?
That's a great question. I mean, the first thing we go to when we're tracking jerseys, obviously the provenance will tell us. Let's just make believe it's a San Jose Sharks jersey, and the San Jose Sharks, while they do not issue letters of authenticity. They put the dates, their set dates are actually in the jersey on the tag. So let's say we're getting a Patrick Marleau that they claim was worn from January 15th to April 8th, the last regular season set. We will literally go to Getty Images, the official photographer of the NHL. We have a contract with them, so we have rights to look at all the photos from every game, and we will literally go through the archives and find the games that Marleau would claim to have worn that shirt and photo match the jersey right to the Getty Images. In this day and age, between the digital photography and the fact that no two jerseys are the same, every jersey is like a fingerprint between the stitching and the hand cut of the letters, not to mention the game use and the repairs. You can conclusively prove a jersey was worn if you have the provenance and the dates and the reference material. So that's basically it. Now, when you go back in time, before the modern era, so to speak, it becomes harder and more challenging. You do the same things I discussed. You also go to video. We do a lot of work, and we have a huge video library where we do the same kinds of things to try to video match a jersey. So that's our main thing. Now, that's video and photo matching isn't everything. It's not conclusively proven 100% of the time. Something like a 1930s shirt, you have to rely on provenance. You have to rely on tagging. You have to rely on knowledge of what the teams did back then with their customizations or where the jerseys came from, and authenticate that way. So we use all of those tools.
Very good. Thanks.
I'm going to piggyback off of the non-program jerseys. So if you've done that or somebody sent one in to get authenticated and it goes onto that separate list per se or database you have, and you mentioned before you can call in anytime or email and get the information on it, especially if there's a trade pending or a purchase or whatever the case is. But your population reports are out there for your program jerseys that are available out there for anybody to see. Is that secondary database list available for the public, or is that internal use only, and it's up to the collector to contact you out of the blue to work on that provenance?
Yeah, it's the latter. It's a database that we share with the public, but they have to access it through calling us. Every jersey that we authenticate, we register and provide registration information. So if you're doing a deal with a guy and he says, here's my MeiGray documentation, it's jersey number 12345, you can have him email you all the information. You can have him show you all that documentation, and then you can call us or email us, and we will confirm exactly what our registration authentication notes show. And very often people do that just to double check before they make trades. But yeah, that right now is not something where you can log on to the database, unlike our population reports for our program teams. That's where you have to call or email us, and we will confirm that information and provide everything we have in our system.
Now, do you guys work, Barry, with auction houses at all? I know we've seen many companies that do the jersey auctions, and now and then you do get some questionable jerseys. Do they approach you at all to authenticate some of those, or have you had to jump in the middle where bidders or that are looking at jerseys saying, "Hey, I don't know about this. Can we enlist your help?"
Yeah, that's a good question. All the above. I mean, we've talked to auction houses all the time. We've offered our services contractually and otherwise. We've sometimes, because we care about the hobby, if we see something that's questionable, we'll reach out to them to say, "Hey, you better rethink this." But we try to offer our services to every auction house because we believe it would benefit the hobby. Now, sometimes, I can't speak for auction houses, but I know sometimes they believe they know more than anybody. And I think there's some auction houses, I would not be ashamed to say, are probably more aggressive than they should be and might believe some provenance or some less than firm authentication and run with it. So, which brings us to we get a lot of calls from collectors who will say, "Hey Barry, I'm thinking of bidding on this. What do you think?" And I try not to authenticate via phone, via magazine, via email, but there are auction houses that will on occasion send stuff to us on a collector's behalf before an auction to have us do our thing. And we're always happy, eager, and we think it's the best thing to do for conclusive authentication to occur before an auction rather than afterwards. Then you get the after effect. There'll be guys who are willing to take a chance on a jersey if they trust the auction house, send it to us. And because we worked with all these auction houses, most of the auction houses do the right thing. If they sold a jersey and we said, "Hey, here's why it's not legit, why we won't register it," and we state our case, most of the auction houses do the right thing. But we wished every auction house, had conclusive authentication before the fact, and we regularly offer our services. Some use them more often than not, but we do work with virtually every auction house.
Definitely good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can say one more thing I think about, sometimes, and this is a tough thing for the auction house. Sometimes the consigner doesn't want the jersey authenticated because there is a cost involved, and some auction houses will say to a consigner, if you never sent it to authentication in the first place when you owned it, now you want us to authenticate it because you want to sell it. And some consigners don't want to spend the money to have a jersey properly authenticated. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody in the hobby to do the right thing. If I owned a jersey and I was putting it up for auction, I would think I'd want to conclusively authenticate it in the first place because I'd get more money for it. Because I think a jersey is more valuable when it's been conclusively authenticated because you're going to have bidders bidding more confidently and more aggressively.
I would agree there, especially you see all that paperwork like we've been taught so many times in this hobby is do your homework, because we've seen how many people have gotten burned on stuff, and we've had past discussions on some bad jerseys out there, and to think back to the custom crafted special days. Yep. and those ones that came out of the back door, so to say, of locker rooms. Yep. That made the hobby a mess.
Yeah, and that really is why MeiGray exists, because I was one of those guys collecting back then and seeing the mess, and I personally didn't want to get burned. And it just, I guess in life we all wonder when the light bulb's going to go over our heads. The light bulb went over my head one day as a collector, and I said, why isn't anybody organizing this hobby, working with the teams? And that was the pre-genesis, the seeds that were planted in my own head. As a collector and as a sports writer, I knew these teams, and I was a collector saying, there's a lot of bad stuff going on behind the scenes, and a lot of money's changing hands. I bet you if you got the teams involved and they authorized someone legitimate to clean this hobby up, it'd be better for everybody. And that was the prenatal steps that MeiGray took to start forming the business.
And I think we all now appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I want to jump back in with a couple more questions. I know we're still limited on time. What would you, or does MeiGray have any great bombshells coming up for us in the near future at all?
Well, if I said yes, that would wet the whistle. I'm not a bombshell kind of guy in the sense that I do keep things close to the vest till we're ready to go. So I'm not trying to titillate anybody, but we are working on expansion plans. We are working on some new things, but I can't say there's anything imminent. So it'd be remiss for me to say, stay by your computers. There's going to be a great big bombshell announcement soon. But we are looking at more ways to bring better jerseys to the hobby and constantly move this hobby forward. So in the next 6 months to a year, I think you're going to see some changes for the better for MeiGray. And they include some of the things we've talked about. We've talked about increasing the ability of collectors to go online and check jerseys, that public database. We've talked about making more deals and better deals. We've talked about some big private collections that would really bring some vintage stuff to the market. We're always working on things like that, and those are the kinds of things we're talking about.
Excellent. Now, throughout all my talks with you, you always stress how important the community in the collecting market is. What would you say is one of your favorite things about the community? What you would like to see improve in the community, and anything relating on that ground?
Well, my favorite thing in the community is, I think, the passion of hockey collectors. I mean, I'm familiar with the football market. I'm familiar with the basketball market. As you know, we also authenticate for the NBA, and I'm familiar with the baseball market. I think the one thing that the hockey collectors, and this dates to the early '90s, it dates to some of the, the leaders in the hobby back then. There was a real interest in keeping the hockey hobby clean. The custom crafted debacle and some of the other debacles of the early to mid '90s were addressed, and the collectors cared enough to share information. So, to directly answer your question, the fact that the hockey community is really one that looks out for each other is something I'm most proud of ourselves, of our community. As far as a criticism, it's not so much a criticism as much as I think, MeiGray gets a lot of criticism for a lot of things, and I could take it, and I'm a believer that constructive criticism actually helps my business and helps the hobby grow. But some of the petty criticism, some of the pettiness of collectors in trying to besmirch other collectors, the jealousies, the little stuff, kind of hurts the hobby, because, any collecting hobby is going to strengthen if the secondary market is stronger. So collectors can help themselves by doing the thing I just spoke about, by being vigilant as far as making sure bad stuff stays out of the market, but also by being willing to share information, willing to share knowledge as opposed to keeping it to themselves. And the reason for that is, and the way I've always described it is, if the size of the pie grows, and the size of the pie being the number of game-worn jerseys and the value of jerseys and the competition among dealers and collectors for those jerseys, if the pie grows, we all can fight over the slices of the pie, but we're all going to get bigger slices of the pie, which is going to strengthen it for all of us. And I think if collectors take that macro view that, well, we can fight over jerseys, and we go, we fight over jerseys in auction and we outbid one another. But if we all recognize that the secondary market and our collaboration in that secondary market, as far as information, as far as trading, makes the hobby stronger. With that vision in mind, I think we'll all benefit down the line, because everybody wants every jersey to go up in price, and for more people to join the hobby and more teams to authenticate properly. And I think that all goes hand in hand if we do the right thing in that regard.
Definitely sounds like you've had a lot of thought on the topic for a while.
Well, this is what I've done for 18 years. So yeah, I think about it night and day because I'm passionate about it, and that's the thing I'm most proud of, is that people start businesses, and I could have started a business selling widgets, but I don't know the first thing about the first thing about the first thing, but I know about jerseys, so the passion comes out, and I think that's why MeiGray's been successful. The guys I hire, the women I hire, are collectors, are sports fans. They know their stuff, and that I think that's true if you own a GameWorn jersey business, or if you owned a restaurant. If you didn't like to cook and you didn't like to eat, you wouldn't be opening up a restaurant. So this is what we like to do. And this is what we do all the time, and I think it shows.
And I like that you say that you hire people that are passionate as well, just like you. And the teams that aren't in the program, me referring to the Blues, since I work with them so much on stuff, I wish the people that were behind the game-worn jerseys and equipment and that, I wish they had the passion too. And honestly, I wish they were in your program, because it'd make things much easier.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know they used to be, and I miss that because I did a lot of business through you guys at that point. But it's just like it seems like, and it's not, the Blues aren't the only team we've talked about in our podcasts, but a lot of teams really, it's not even a secondary thing. It's just like an afterthought of, oh yeah, we'll mess with these. And to a lot of them, if you're trying to get information or buy jerseys or whatever, it's always such a bother.
Yeah, I think and we've, I've had conversations with the Blues well after they left us. They were with us through, I believe, 2007, and we had a great relationship with them. And like a lot of teams, they felt, oh, why do we need MeiGray? We can do this ourselves and make the money ourselves and cut out the middleman. But as you guys have learned and seen, sometimes the customer service is not the same, and the attention to detail is not the same, and it's strictly a matter of how much the team cares. I'm sorry to say there are teams that just don't care as much as others, and we have those conversations with those teams from time to time. And some teams have come back. We've gotten one of our most popular teams because they've won 2 out of the last 3 Stanley Cups. And probably my greatest success story has been my relationship with the LA Kings. We started working with the LA Kings before the program in 2001. They went with us through 2007. They left us figuring they could do it themselves and came back in 2010 when they realized they couldn't. And I like to remind them that as soon as they came back to us, that's when they started winning Stanley Cups. So it's always nice to see when a team recognizes, hey, yeah, this isn't as easy as we like to think. And yes, our job is to win hockey games, and let's let the game-worn hobby and the people who really know the game-worn hobby handle the game-worn jerseys. So we make that pitch to a lot of teams all the time.
I appreciate everything you've done for the hobby, Barry. I know we're cutting a little bit low on time. I definitely want to say anytime you want to come back on the show, you are more than welcome. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you know how to figure out what the current topic of the week is going to be, and we do it, looks like every 2 weeks, almost pretty consistently. So definitely want to thank you for coming on. And if you want to stick around.
Thanks for having me, Derek. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate what you've done for the hobby. I mean, GameWorn.us has become a real asset to the hobby. It's provided another voice, and as I said to you maybe a year or so ago, when GameWorn really took the next step, it's the more voices of people who care about the hobby, the better. Makes for a better hobby. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for the kind words, and all my guys connected and listening to the calls. I appreciate that. Thank you for chiming in. It always makes the show a little bit better.
It's always fun, even better with guests.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Barry.
I'll see you again soon. We'll talk again
Thanks
soon.
a lot.
Yep, we can all go ahead and stay connected. I'm going to go ahead and wind down the show. And after we cut out, we'll go ahead and do our after show banter, and then we'll see you guys. So anybody out there listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for supporting us in our GameWorn hobby. We will see you in 2 weeks when we figure out exactly what we're going to talk about. We will let you know. Obviously, the ways to keep track on the show, you can follow us on iTunes in the podcast section. On GameWorn.us, there's always going to be an article about it. In the forums, we have a GameWorn Radio forum. And on Facebook, we have a Facebook group. So thanks for listening. We'll see you in a couple weeks.